whose long-term relationship faded? What was the final straw that made you realize it was time to call it a day? Story 1. That's kind of where I am. Personally, I love my partner. He's a great guy and we get along well. We're just not compatible for a long-term life. I want kids to be successful, to have things change over time and experience new things. He wants none of that. He just wants to exist, for lack of a better explanation. He's not lazy or anything. He's just happy where he is in life and has no desire to better himself. I want life to change and evolve. I'm happy that he's happy with his life, but I want more. And he has absolutely zero desire because things are good enough. The final straw will probably be when I get a job that moves me away. I'll have to sell the house and separate our finances, which hopefully won't be that big of a deal. Honestly, I've been pretty open about what I want and that I have no plans to sit here forever, so I don't think it'll be a surprise. Story 2. This is a little different, but she was actually the one that broke up with me. You see, I never stopped loving her, but for some reason I stopped trying, and sadly enough, I didn't notice. She would want to hang out or cook and clean together, but I got to the point where I just wanted to work or play video games. I stopped showing her how much I really cared, and it was really starting to affect her self-esteem. We dated for 4 years, and I never noticed the problems were from me until it was too late. She recently told me a story that is a testimony for how little I was trying. One weekend, for her birthday, I got her tickets to a concert that we went out of town for. The concert was a Saturday, and we came back that Sunday. Sunday was her actual birthday, and she had asked me to go on a walk with her on the beach. I told her I was too tired and wanted to rest and play video games. I remember the conversation, and I remember she was gone for some time, but she didn't tell me until after we broke up what she did. She went on that walk by herself and cried because I wouldn't give her the time of day on her birthday. I still wish there was a way to make it up to her, but how do you apologize for doing something like that? I wish the best for her, but things would have never changed if she didn't break up with me, and I just hope she's doing well on her own. Story 3. She said she was unhappy and that if she didn't get what she wanted, she would not leave. Her leverage was to be miserable and make my life miserable by staying. She did not see this as unreasonable. Thus, my only options were to give in or be the bad guy and end it. So I was the bad guy and ended it, and because I was the bad guy, all our mutual friends sided with her. And that's the story of how I got out of an unhappy relationship at the cost of my entire social life too. Story 4. Together 4 years. Things fell apart that last year. She no longer texted sweet things to me or gave me any sort of positivity and claimed she was more mature than when we first started dating. She called me and said we needed a break for a week, then slept with 2 guys. And that was the moment. Then she said how she stopped loving me and having feelings after the first year of us dating, but stated that she stayed out of pity for my feelings. It's been 2 years since, and it's scary to trust. Doing that to a man makes him feel hollow and unlovable. I love myself, but constantly fear that no woman could ever love me for who I am. Story 5. He eventually got arrested, but got out of probation not too long ago. And I was in a 4-year relationship. The first 3.5 years was a long-distance relationship, and I only saw him once a month. The close relationship was always forced, and he refused to wear a condom. I was in an abusive relationship, but didn't know because he was my first boyfriend. He took my virginity, and I thought this was normal. When we moved in together, we got 2 separate bedrooms. He gave me the smallest room because he has more stuff. Pat rat. That was the worst 6 months of my life. That's when I finally saw his true self because he doesn't have a phone to hide behind anymore. He is a lazy piece of cow. I was always taking care of him, doing chores, working 2 jobs, quit school, cook every day, literally everything. All he does is play games, drink, and go to college. Surprised that he can manage that. One day I worked a double shift. My body hurt, so I texted him and asked if he can make dinner for us before I get home. When I arrived home, the kitchen was dirty and no food was cooked. I went to his bedroom and saw that he was in a LOL game. That's cool, I played too. Maybe it's a long game and he's about to finish. I walked up and saw that the in-game timer was 10 minutes. I asked him to make dinner an hour ago. I asked him what happened. He said he just sliced an avocado, and there's a half of an avocado in the fridge for me. I broke down crying. The straw that broke my back was that we were at a party. My friend brought his girlfriend over. She passed out on the floor and my friend asked if I had any blankets. I gave him one and he went over to her and tucked her in. My mind flashed before my eyes that I didn't have a relationship. I had a man-child who treated me like a maid and a close relationship doll. A couple months later, I broke up with him and dated someone else. But I still lived in that apartment because he's my best friend and I don't want to abandon it. I'm so flipping stupid. He became super abusive, manipulate me, gaslight me, and assaulted me. I told no one because I feel ashamed. I did eventually moved out but lived in a different toxic environment. I came over one day because he manipulated me too, telling me that I hurt him and I own him. He needed more closure from our breakup, so I need to sleep over, and if I don't do it, I damaged him. He assaulted me when I was asleep. I woke up with the tip of his banana inside me and trying to force the rest in. I shoved him off and ran out of the apartment crying. He tried to call me, and when I picked up I asked why did he do it. His response that he was trying to be cute. I completely changed as a person. I start becoming toxic and I start hurting others. I lost my job. I lost my friends. My new boyfriend broke up with me. Everyone from my life and started hurting myself. It didn't take too long until I finally tried to terminate myself. I was in a mental hospital for 3 months. 4 months after I get discharged, my true friend encouraged me to call the police and charge him for assault. I spent 6 months working with the detective. He fully believed in me and helped me out. I called my ex and, with the detective listening, he helped me ask the right questions because my ex kept gaslighting. I don't know what you're talking about. You're imagining things again. To a full confession. On New Year's Day, I was getting my hair done when the detective called me and informed me that there was a warrant for his arrest and he's in jail. He was charged with first-degree close relationship battery and third-degree felony battery causing permanent disability. I cry at the saloon. Unfortunately, I never got what I wanted it. His daddy got him an expensive lawyer, and the lawyer went around and interviewed toxic people from my life and concluded that the defendant was only telling me what I wanted to hear because I'm crazy. He was sentenced to 5-year probation and does not have to register as a close relationship offender. On May 2021, he requested early release after only serving 2.5 years in probation. I wrote an objection letter and showed up to virtual court, but the judge gave it to him. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. Story 6. I was always complaining about him to my friends and considered that normal. Eventually, a friend of mine told me, "You know you're only 21. You don't have to settle." Those words flipped a switch in me. I realized I was settling for this guy. I didn't even love him any. I was basically ready to break up with him, but was willing to talk before I drove 12 hours away to see family in a couple days. He blew me off. To play a card game with his friends 2 days in a row. I decided then and there I didn't want to talk about it and I was over the relationship. This was probably 4 to 5 years ago. From what I heard, he still hates me but is living his best life. I think we were both settling for each other. Story 7. He stood me up several times. Then for one meeting about 6 times, and after he tried it a 7th time, I said that if he won't come today, he don't have to come ever again. The only thing how he could have saved it was by standing in front of my doof the next day, but without telling me. He didn't. For a few months before I thought about breaking up but wasn't sure. And in COVID times, it's hard to find someone new, but this last time finally made me realize that I deserve someone more reliable. Story 8. It went on off and on for 10 years. We quarreled and went out with other people, but we always went back together. It was like having a beautiful pair of shoes you always dreamed about having, but they were half a size too small. So you could wear the shoes, but you could always be in pain. The final straw was when she wouldn't go to couples counseling and told me, "You go because you're always bringing up our problems." Story 9. When I'm irreparably sad or discontent with the present situation, I fast forward a year or 2 years or whatever and imagine myself the most content and happy I could possibly be. Then I try to reverse engineer my life and I look at the differences between the present and the fantasy to look for changes I can make to get to where I want to be. I fell in love and got married. And over almost a decade, I found that I was imagining those optimal situations in my head more and more often. Somewhere in the course of my marriage, those fantasies changed and I wasn't looking at us and where I'd like us to be. Instead, I saw myself alone and happy. In an apartment, not a house. With like, a collection of plants maybe, and not 3 kids. Because the original fantasy of that, the kids, the house, and us having them together, wasn't the best possible outcome. I think I came to terms with the fact that there was no way to change anything in the present to get to a future where we, as a husband and wife, would be happy. It took me a bit to realize this, and I fought it. We both did. We went to therapy. We had many conversations, sad, angry, hopeful, and in the end, it didn't work out. It took us a while, but we're friends now, and we both acknowledged that it was better to end it when we knew it was over, rather than keep it going and deprive ourselves of the possibility of being happy with someone else. FYI, I'm alone now, but I have my apartment and I have many plants. And I'm generally content and I find that I have less of those longing moments where I fast forward. Story 10. Long distance. Engaged. She wasn't handling isolation from the pandemic well, and blamed me for not giving her more companionship. Looking back, we had communication problems. I do the same thing BoJack Horseman's Mr. Peanut Butter does. Try to fix things when I should just be listening. On the other hand, she shuts down and doesn't communicate her needs well. She also isn't willing to make changes to remove the things stressing her out. Anyway, she slowly stopped talking to me over many months. Was always too busy to talk, Too tired to Skype? Not interested in gaming or Netflix together? I challenged her. Does she still want a relationship or no? She wouldn't give a solid answer. I gave her an ultimatum, couples counseling or we're done. We had one session over the phone, and she asked for a few days to process. Fair enough. A week later, she wouldn't answer my calls at all or texts. I just couldn't keep trying anymore. I couldn't keep spending all day worrying about whether or not our relationship was over. I didn't want it to end, but I can't live in limbo like that. South. Yeah, that was in December. Haven't spoken to her since the counseling session. Couldn't even say goodbye. Don't know what to say to her anymore. Getting ghosted by my fiancé isn't a good feeling. Story 11. She was really overweight and unhealthy. When we first met, she was losing weight and proud of it. I thought this would continue, but it stopped shortly after we started dating. I had tried multiple times over a few years to help her get to a healthy weight. The last time she started hiding food, and it was like a game to her when I found it. One day while explaining the situation to my parents, I started crying. That's when I truly embraced how miserable I was and that I had to break it off. There were other things too, but this was the last straw. Story 12. When we separated for 2 weeks and told me he had tried to date another girl, left her notes and bought her flowers, flirted with her. I told him if he were to do those things with me, we wouldn't even have problems. And his response was, well, that's what you do when you're trying to get someone, you date them. We're married. I don't need to get you, so I don't need to date you. That was the kicker. And the part where we had a basic 5-year plan, buy a bigger house with a garage and save up, he wanted kids. I wasn't really on board with that, but I was making it work. Then I came home one day, and he'd basically wasted away $10,000 of our savings buying junk cars without talking with me when we were supposed to be saving for a new place. When I confronted him, he went on a rant about how he didn't want to move anywhere or do any part of our plan. He's the one who wanted a garage and more space. And he wanted kids but didn't want to raise kids with me. Which honestly, I'm so glad I didn't, obviously, but I never wanted kids and I was considering compromising what I wanted for him. That was 4 years ago and my life is perfect now. I have a loving, caring boyfriend of 2 years, a killer career making more money than he ever did. I fixed all the things I hated about myself, got braces, a degree, lost 70 pounds, etc. And happy to report 4 weeks post-hysterectomy so I don't ever have to worry about compromising my child-free life ever again. Story 13. It was a 14-year relationship and 10-year marriage. He cheated and then wanted to move her and her kids into my house in a sister-wives fashion. I said no and get the F out. She left him when she realized I was the breadwinner and they ended up living with his mom, who wasn't happy about it. It wasn't until he was gone that I realized that I was happier without him. Story 14. When, after 4 years together, I found out that he built up an entire new friend group who had no idea I existed. I found out after 6 months because he'd gotten very attached to this girl he kept on claiming was just a friend. They slipped off on a weekend getaway together that he said was a guy's trip. When they got back and parts of that story started to come out, I asked him if she knows about me and he said, it never came up. Found her on FB. We had a 30-minute phone call and she said, there's no way in hell I was in a relationship with him because, according to the whole friend group, he's been 100% single since they've known him. She called me incredibly stupid for thinking that I was actually dating him. In the end, she told me to find someone else who was actually proud of being with. He panicked not because I found out or of how she talked to me, but because he was trying to do damage control on her their end. This just happened this week. Story 15. My first close relationship was basically a dead bedroom, but I didn't really realize it. I figured it was just normal to have some grudging activity every 2 weeks or so. One night, I was all worked up for some reason and started initiating. She sighed and said, oh, all right. Story 16. Toxic positivity, along with lack of trust and communication. I had to move out of state to keep my job, and that was in the middle of my first long-term relationship, and his biggest concern was whether we would still be in a relationship or not. Then it got bad when my depression got worse. Instead of listening to me about how he could help, he instead decided to use toxic positivity to essentially mask the fact I was depressed, saying things that just made it worse. Then he decided that he would keep information from me, like the fact he went through my phone and laptop behind my back, or that there were multiple rumors being spread about me amongst our, at the time, friends. What really broke the camel's back was when I had to decide whether I was going to come back home for the weekend for a family holiday. I realized that I didn't plan on making time to see him because I absolutely dreaded it. That's when I knew it was really over. I couldn't put on a happy face to appease the person who actively contributed in trying to reshape my personality to fit a narrative that wasn't true to me and essentially put my mental health into a place where it wasn't healthy. Story 17. She always made everything about her. One weekend, the plumbing failed on my apartment and it rained on my downstairs neighbor. She flipped her cow about not being able to shower and would tea in a gym, etc., saying she'd be assaulted. We drove an hour and a half to my parents' house so she could. My dad, being a joker, said, "See, sounds like it's their roof problem, not your shower problem. Should have just showered anyway." She, in all seriousness, turned on me and exclaimed he was right, we should have kept using the shower. I told her that was the most selfish thing I'd ever heard and she drove off. We each took our own car there since she had hers there when my place failed, in a huff. I had been on the edge for a while and she called after 10 minutes expecting me to ask her to come back. I didn't. And when she asked if she should turn around, I told her not to bother. I wanted to take a break for a bit and think on things. I broke up with her a few days later and won $500 on a scratch ticket same day. Story 18. Zoloft for me. My ex was an abusive, controlling narcissist. We were together for 5 years, 4 of which were probably the worst in my entire life. My self-worth was, as he would berate and insult me for hours if he didn't get his way. This went on almost every single day. I knew for a few years that I didn't love him and in fact hated him. I pretty much cried at least once a day. Finally, after spending my 40th birthday on a hotline since he spent the entire day insulting me because he didn't get invited to lunch with my mom and grandma, I decided to seek medical help. The doctor prescribed Zoloft, and after about a month, my confidence and self-worth right back up. I told him to leave, and he did, although I'm pretty sure he figured I would change my mind. I never did and didn't look back. Nothing ever felt as good as the day he finally got all of his stuff and I never had to see or talk to him again. I've been single ever since. Story 19. We met in college. We came from different states. We decided to have a weekend getaway once during the summer break. I was to pick him up at his house. We'd spend the day at the beach, then stay overnight at a hotel. I drove 4-ish hours altogether. There was traffic, and midway through I got into my first ever car accident. A minor fender bender, and no one was hurt, but I was a bit rattled. Stressed that I'd wasted valuable daylight between the traffic and the accident. I finally make it to his house and text him that I'm here and about what went down on the road. I was an hour or two behind schedule. Y'all, he wasn't done packing for one night, and he'd had an extra hour to get that sorted out anyway. I waited an additional hour before finally comes out and gets in the oh no car. We go to the beach and it's late in the day. Soon enough the sun will be setting, but at least we can hang out by the waves and watch the sunset, right? I've got my bathing suit on under a dress, so I take off the dress, and at this point, my jeans-clad ex tells me he didn't bring any kind of swimsuit. At this point, I just start weeping from the stress of the trip and the accident and feeling like I'd wasted my whole day for this clueless, inconsiderate bad person. And he was just nonplussed. He seemingly could not comprehend why I was upset. That was the beginning of the end. Story 20. When my father passed away, I felt alone. Not because she wasn't willing to help, but she wasn't able to help because she wasn't taking care of herself intellectually and physically. She had so many issues and traumas of her own that she was, in my opinion, not dealing with, that I couldn't look after myself. I tried to get her to see a psych, got her to see one finally after months, but she just stopped going because she felt better, and stopped taking her meds because she felt better. Well, anyone who's been in a mental health situation knows where this is going. She wasn't better, and her own depression and anxiety crept up on, and she was in the worst spot of her mental health journey I've ever seen. And then my dad passed away. I had to internalize my grief, my own depression and anxiety, and hold it all together to help her through her day-to-day. I turned into a caregiver during some of the darkest days of my life, and any time I could take to myself, I completely shut myself off just to try to get a bit of a respite from everything. I have my own psych who I've been seeing for nearly a decade at that, who was great and an amazing help, but not having the love of your life to depend on during that kind of difficulty, it's just not the same. We ended up drifting, becoming distant, no physical intimacy, not even talking about close relationship, just no cuddles or anything. I couldn't confide issues with her. She started to get worse. I became not just a mental health caregiver, but a maid, as well as she began to decline more and more. We turned into roommates who slept in the same bed. Eventually, internally, I set a date when I knew if things didn't change, I needed to break it off for my own good. But I still wanted to give her a bit more time so she could maybe get back on track, maybe salvage the relationship. Eventually, she came to me to talk and was thinking of breaking things off for her own good. I agreed with her, and we split shortly after. I still love her, and I wish her all the best in life, but it just wasn't the right fit at that time. Story 21. She was still rather wishy-washy about the relationship after 5 years, and I was doing all the logistical labor to necessarily maintain a relationship. She had a busy job, but then so did I, and I was far more willing to put in the effort. I realized I'd rather find someone else, or even be alone, than be in a relationship like that.